Hi everyone. So before you guys look at the next video, I wanted to show you this and talk about different grid styles. Because I do only show you one example of a grid. Actually, I show you, I think, two. And I wanted to make sure that you understood that there are lots and lots of different approaches to grids. A two-column grid is a really great way to start out with, but from my perspective, like looking at really more involved grids allows you to do a lot more. And so let's just look at this. I did a search for grid in InDesign so that you saw a grid that looked like an InDesign document. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the options. So this is considered a modular grid, and a modular grid is great because I could take 3 of these cells, or I could take 2 of these cells, or I could take 1 of these cells, or I could take all 4 of these cells. So it allows you like this incredible flexibility and allows you all kinds of stuff. And now this is an example of kind of a more evolved modular grid. And you can see how they're really tightly placing this line to meet with the text. Although I will say, never do this, never allow type to go across 2 pages because this gutter interferes with the read heavily. And it's such a bad example. But great that you guys see it before you're starting this project. But you can see that they actually have these smaller grids, and then they actually have a secondary grid. Grids can be really involved, and this is an example of that same grid where you can see that these are 3 columns, and then each column is broken into 2 cells. You can also do something like this where you're playing off very specific points that are kind of more abstracted, and that may like relate to the way how you like crop your images. So maybe you crop your image like a triangle, or you crop it like this triangle, or you crop it like this triangle. But you also see that the underlying structure also gives you a modular grid. So there are so many options here. Here's a 3-column grid. And I showed you briefly a 3-column grid, and I showed you a 2-column grid. Here's a 2-column grid, and you can see that they're kind of indicating. Here's another great example of a modular grid where they have 5 cells. Odd numbers are great because it keeps it interesting. You can see that they're using 4, they're using 2, and they're using 1. So grids can be really wonderful tools to really move the page around. Oops, look at this. So this is not off the table where they are playing off a diagonal, although if you're doing something like that, probably contact me because I will need to show you how to set that up. It's a little bit different. So I would ask that you spend a little time, do a search for grid in InDesign. I think you're required to show me 3 different grids that you're using and that you've looked at. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want you to not just default to a 2-column grid. Think about different options. It is a lot more work to put together a modular grid, but the modular grid allows you so much more diversity in the way that you lay out. So publication design, you are specifically being called out to do something really, much more interesting than a simple 2-column grid. Whereas intermediate graphic design might do something a little bit more basic. And that's expected because this is the first time we're kind of jumping into that. All right, I look forward to seeing your grids. Normally I would show you all kinds of great books, and I might actually list the books that I think are great grid books. So if you choose to buy some grid books, you could, but I like to show you guys about 4 or 5 different grid books when we're in class face-to-face. From my perspective, buying a grid book is something that you can use in almost every class, just like the color index is a wonderful tool to use in almost any class. because you are never going to get rid of color or grid in graphic design, and this is not specific to any one class. All right, thanks.